Hey, I want to get rolling because I've got, to me, a real important message that I hope has a lasting impact through the rest of this year. And so, before I get started, let's pray. God, I'm grateful for your love for us. I'm grateful to be back in place of home and place of familiarity, place where you've formed a huge chunk of my life. And I just pray, God, that every plan that you have for this place would come to fruition, God, that we would not miss out on where you're leading. We would not miss out on anything that you intend to happen in this place, in this community. Lord, that you would find our hearts attentive to you and your truth, and that would change us, truly change us. Each day, how we live, how we see our lives, how we see our relationships, and what you have planned for us as we represent you in this world. We love you, and we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. I'm going to rearrange a little bit up here so I can get... Today I want to share with you something that essentially has formed all of what is my life right now. Because as I was going through college, about halfway through my freshman year, I kind of felt like the Lord saying, hey, I want you to do a ministry and lead a church. And that was a radical shift for me. So I changed colleges, started pursuing, church leadership, studying the scriptures, formal training in that. Went to grad school, went to another grad school, 2 master's degrees on Bible, training and leadership. And ready to kind of, in that mindset, just kind of do what I knew to do, familiar, like lead church. And all I knew was the church kind of I grew up in. And so was my mentality. And I got to the point where this is about 1997, 98. And I was leading the church for the first time for a couple years, like as a senior leader. And I absolutely hated it. Like something in me was like, I don't know if I can do this the rest of my life. And it was a ton of bricks on me. And I remember coming home and Mindy's like, what's going on? And I'm like, I know I've prepared for about, 7 years now to do this, but I don't know if I can do this the rest of my life. And I couldn't figure out like why what I was troubled with. And so it kind of set us on a journey of why do I not like this thing called church? And it kind of pushed us to a number of different places that we were seeking wisdom, advice. We went to a couple conferences. And there was a moment in time where Mindy and I were at a conference in Chicago, and it was just this moment where God made a seismic shift in our life, in our hearts. And we kind of use this phrase like, we feel like we're wasting our lives. Like just going through the motions of church and going through the motions of church leadership. And at that moment in time, we were at this evangelism conference, and I would not say that I had a burning desire to reach people who do not know Christ. A burning desire to reach outside of the family of God, to draw people into God's family. And I would say that was an important part of being a church, but it wasn't really like just deep passion. And I can remember that conference and Mindy and I talking over and over again, day after day, and we just came back to our setting at the time and say, you know what? We are not going to waste our life going through the motions of church. And that ultimately led us to a journey that 2 years after that moved us here to Charlotte and to start a brand new church. And it was a church that says, hey, we are not going to, Charlotte doesn't need another church. Lost people need another expression where they can find their way into the family of God. And that's where we've tried to be and tried to stay. But you know what? Almost 18 years later now, we're in this mode where we're more at risk of settling into the motions of church than we've ever been before. And I'm just telling you, like, I'm not content with that. And I feel us kind of, because of the different structures and whether it's, growth and staff leadership or, a new facility and land and these things that, that kind of tend to grab our attention and maybe cause a distraction, even though it's rooted in, like, our hope and a mission that we will be a greater impact to people outside God's family through this thing. It's still kind of just like, whoa, okay, where are we at here in the midst of all of this? And so I've been praying a lot about what do we need to do. And it comes down to this message today that I hope will truly set a fire in our hearts that we literally can't control. That God consumes us with His mission, and it leads us places where maybe we don't even see ourselves going. But all of a sudden, because we give ourselves over to God's truth and His mission, we step into a life that we didn't plan for ourselves, but it's greater than that. So I just got back from Ethiopia, and one of the reasons that we do that is this message. And it's easy to get into some mission work and start, doing good stuff. And, people ask, somebody in the airport in D.C. last night was kind of like, hey, what are you guys doing there? And I just kind of talk mostly about development work because it's easy to talk about. We do some clean water wells, and we got sponsored kids and, just different projects that are really helping people's life better, solar project and all those things. But you know what? Like, what are we doing? Why are we there? And it comes down to this message today. So let's dive in. So here's a picture of that you guys need to just, like this. If you have a sponsored child, okay, $35 a month, I cannot communicate to you how big a difference you're making, all right? I sat in these classes, and we'll have different pictures, better pictures, sometime this week or next week, but where we got every student in those classes, and man, I just told them, hey, there is a church that thinks about you. There's a whole church that prays for you, and we just love you guys, and you are always in our hearts and in our minds. And I thought, like these kids, man, they're just in a desperate situation. And this school is this gigantic source of hope that cannot be understated. And these kids come from all different backgrounds. Some of them are trapped, most of them are trapped because their families are trapped in the bounds, the chains of religion, whether that's an Ethiopian Orthodox or Islam. They're just trapped, and they don't know anything different. But through this school and its heartbeat of not just providing great education, it's bringing this message of Jesus Christ that is powerful in each and every one of those families' life. I mean, the head shake of the Islamic mosque, okay? Their kids go here. One of you are their sponsor, like you're sponsoring his daughter. And she's at this school. Like, that's the power that is possible with this thing. So if you are sponsoring a kid, like, just pray for that kid every day. And just pray that the truth and the hope of Christ would find its way into their hearts from whatever background they're in. And that they would be able to step into God's family and to all the future that He has for them. The difference that you're making in this is just incredible. I hope to take you there, just introduce you to this little school at some point. And so we're kind of planning some future trips there, and it should be real interesting. But I kind of want to give you the layout of what we're doing here. So this is a map. So if you look at Ethiopia, it's a strategic country. It's the first country that's non-Muslim country coming out of the Middle East. Okay, so you come down through the Middle East and you get into Egypt and Sudan and Somalia, all dominated by Islam, and then you hit Ethiopia. And so it's a very strategic country from a faith standpoint because it's a battleground. And in this country, there's about a third what we would call evangelical Christians, about a third Muslim and about a third Ethiopian Orthodox. And so there's just this hodgepodge. You're not really sure, what pocket you're in, and you're in different places there. But God's led us to this group of people called the Zay people. There's about 6,000 of those people, and they inhabit these 3 islands in the middle of this crater lake that's like, it's up in the mountains. It's volcanic territory, and these crater lakes have been created out of that. And this group is intentionally isolationist. Life's tough enough in Ethiopia, but they're going to isolate themselves to these islands to keep the world away. And they are intentionally hardcore Ethiopian Orthodox. I don't have time to go into all that, but its roots are Christian, but through hundreds and hundreds of years, it's just religion, and it's just wrapped up with the state tax money and all that goes into the power and the control of the people. And it's really devastating because the message of Jesus is just nowhere to be found. And truth be known, we face more persecution from the Ethiopian Orthodox Church than we do from the Muslims in this country with our presence there. And so you kind of get a reality. But what's happened is this group of people called the Zay people, they have kind of migrated to the shoreline. This is the main city called Zwei, and it's kind of our headquarters when we go there. But the Zay people aren't very accepted in this. There's kind of some racism because they're a northern Ethiopian group, and they're not really accepted in this town. And so they don't tend to settle here. When they want to get off the islands, they settle either up here in a town called Mekki, here in a town, Herrera, which is where the school is, and also on the south side of the lake called Bochesa. And so we've partnered with a New Covenant Mission, and it's a group you need to follow, and they're specifically focused on reaching unreached people groups in Ethiopia. And that's why they're partnered with them. And honestly, when I first asked them, hey, well, can we partner with you? Because there's this group of people in southern Ethiopia, and the guy just stopped me like right up there. He's like, yeah, we're not interested. I'm like, whoa, I haven't even told you what we're doing here. And he's like, yeah, but southern Ethiopia is mostly, it's got the presence of Christ, spread throughout the region and different churches. And so there's opportunities there. I said, well, wait just a second. Like, this is a northern Ethiopian group that's kind of settled down here. And then he's like, okay, tell me more. I was like, Joshua Project has listed those a few years ago as an unreached people group, which means less than 5% gospel witness in their people. And so he's like, all right. And so we work through them. When you give money here, part of that money pays a full-time salary and all ministry expenses to Masela, and he's our church planner in Mekki. Masela is from this big island, and he has a house there that you guys built for him, whether you knew that or not. But his ministry and his church is here, but he spends time regularly back at his home, like sharing Jesus with these people on the island. We have 2 church planners now. I met a new one while I was there in Bochesa, and we had just purchased a piece of property, or helped purchase. We paid about half for the property there for them to build the church that they've been building and gathering in people's homes over the last couple years. And then here in Herrera, where the Hope School is, we also have a church, church planner, Abe, who is there, and he's working with a senior leader called Muhammad, and I've known Muhammad for several years, and he is that church is exploding. And one of the things that you guys did in giving here was Muhammad was traveling actually from Mekki, because that's where his family lived, over here to do ministry. And a couple years ago when I was there, I was like, hey, what's your greatest need? He's like, I really need a house built here so that I can move my family here and, we can do life here. We bought him the materials to build a house, and he moved him and his 4 kids, his wife and 4 kids there, and now that ministry is exploding there to the point where they're having to build another church because their previous building is not adequate. And so this is kind of our plan of attack, if you will, to get Jesus to these people on these islands. And it's because on the islands, there's a little bit of power struggle, and there's a little bit of control. And they want our help when it comes to clean water and electricity and solar power and those kind of things. But they would rather us not bring Jesus with us, which is not an option to us. And so we're always kind of trying to figure out this thing. But everything that we're doing here is because of this message today. So let me dive in, and I'm going to try to go quick, all right? I know that's laughable, but this should probably trouble you more than it comforts you today, okay? And if it doesn't, there's something wrong, all right? We have to hold on to this thing called urgency, okay? I think our world robs us when it comes to Jesus about this topic of urgency. I think there's a lot of reasons why that happens. I think because you don't want to be seen as a fanatic, and when you have some urgency, that's one of the places that it leads you. Because the reality is this: heaven and hell, they're real places. And real people go there when they die. Like everybody that you lock eyes with, everybody on this earth who has ever lived, when they die, they are headed to one of these places. Okay, that's the truth of the Scripture. And I know sometimes it's just more convenient to not be troubled by that truth. But the reality is that's the truth that the Bible presents. Is that heaven and hell, they're real places. Real people go there when they die. And in our effort to kind of lead with love, because that's how we want to do. We're kind of tired of the people who just bash people with just the heaven and hell message over and over again. And we want to be more compassionate and more loving and build relationships so that they trust us and know us and think that we're decent people, so that they would want to know us maybe more about Jesus. Somehow in the middle of building a relationship and being kind of subtle or leading with love first, which we should, we've kind of led ourselves into silence when it comes to this topic of urgency in heaven and hell. We start to just build relationships and do good stuff rather than sharing the truth about Jesus Christ and the fate of those who die without faith in Jesus Christ. We just tend to leave that out because it's easier to leave it out. I would love to leave it out if I could, but this message and the truth of the Bible doesn't allow me to do that if I love people. And the third thing about urgency is that we need to go around the corner or around the world. Like, we've got to go to take this message. And listen, you don't have to go to Ethiopia. You don't have to work in the middle of nowhere, halfway around the world. I mean, the world is in our backyard. The world is in our neighborhoods. The world is in our workplaces. The world is in our schools. I mean, there's a group of people that we work with in Charlotte, and they used to take mission trips all around the world, use soccer, to kind of build relationships and all that. And finally, about 10 years ago, they said, I don't know why we're going around the world. Everybody's right here in our backyard, right here in Charlotte. And so they quit going all around the world, and they just started right there because that's where the world is. And that's Project 658 down on Central Avenue. Like it doesn't matter where we go. It matters what we do and what we say and how we express an urgency about this message of Jesus Christ. And so the reality that you got to wrestle with is, if you're loving people and caring for people, in relationship with people right now who you know aren't a part of God's family, and you don't have an internal urgency to share with them or figure out how to share with them this message, then there's something wrong with our hearts. And we're just kind of going through the motions of life, pretending that things that don't matter actually matter, while at the same time ignoring the most critical message that people need to hear. Because the reality is that people who have never heard the message of Jesus Christ, people who have never heard it, if they die apart from hearing the message of Jesus Christ, they are headed for an eternity outside of God's family, having to face their own sins and the punishment for them. That's a hard truth. You're saying, you mean to tell me, David, that the innocent person on an island all by himself who's just, never heard of Jesus, and he lives his whole life and he dies, the Bible says that person's going to be in hell? Yes, it does. And the flaw with that whole reasoning, the flaw with that whole logic is that according to the Bible, there are no innocent people. So no, innocent people are not going to suffer. But the reality is there's no innocent people. And so I'm going to dive into a few passages that kind of lay out the reality that should lead us to a sense of urgency. And I hope that it captures you and it sets a fire in your heart and in your soul that takes you places where you never thought you would go. And leads you into conversations speaking truth that you never thought you would speak. All because you love people who are outside of God's family. So the first passage is in Romans chapter 1. And it just says this: "For I'm not ashamed of this good news about Christ. It's the power of God at work. And it saves everyone who what? Everyone who believes." Okay? Listen, Christ died. His gospel, his message of salvation is purchased for all. But all do not receive it. All do not step into it. You have an entrance. You have a pass into God's family. But it requires you to believe. It's saving everyone who believes. Keep going. Keep going. Okay. This good news tells us how God makes us right in His sight. This is accomplished from start to finish by faith. As the scripture says, it's through faith that a righteous person has life. And then it gets tough. But God shows His anger from heaven against all sinful and wicked people. And this is how He defines sinful and wicked people: who suppress the truth by their wickedness. They know the truth about God because He has made it obvious to them. Okay? So here's the first idea about Romans chapter 1 that I want to stop on for a second, is that all people in all places, they know God. That's what this teaches us, okay? They know the truth about God because God has made it obvious to them. So the person on the island all by themselves, the person who's never heard, vocally a message, truth specific about Jesus Christ, they still know God according to Romans 1. They know the truth about God because God has made it obvious to them. Let's keep going. For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and the sky. Through everything that God made, they can clearly see His invisible qualities, His eternal power, and His divine nature. So listen, it says the way they know God. How does everybody know God? The way they know God is by the way God has made the world and by the way God has formed their own consciences. Okay? Ecclesiastes talks about this, this God-shaped place in our hearts that is only going to be satisfied with God. And I can watch people who don't have that void, that God-shaped void filled with God, go through the revolutions and the destructive behavior and the bonds of chains that wrap them up trying to figure out how to fill that void. And you've seen so many of your friends do that same thing. But the way they know God is because they can look out, they can see the world, and they can look in, and they know that there's a God, according to Romans 1. This is what's comforting to me about this. I know that every person I'm talking to, I'm not starting from scratch. I mean, it might feel that way. You might feel like some of the people at your workplace or people you go to school with, or maybe somebody that's in your apartment complex or in your neighborhood. You might think, man, they are so far away from even thinking about God. And you couldn't be further wrong. You couldn't be further from the truth. Because the reality is, they can't get away from this. The reality is they can't get away from it in here, and they can't get away from it out there. Because they know God by seeing God's made it obvious to them, outside and inside. All right, let's keep going. So they have no excuse for not knowing God. Yes, they knew God, but they wouldn't worship him as God or even give him thanks. And they began to think up foolish ideas about what God was like. As a result, their minds became dark and confused. Claiming to be wise, they instead became utter fools. So God abandoned them to do whatever shameful things their hearts desired. As a result, they did vile and degrading things with each other's bodies. Listen, they traded the truth about God for a lie. So they worshiped and served the things God created instead of the Creator himself, who's worthy of eternal praise. I mean, like this is the commentary of our communities. This is the commentary of our cities. This is the commentary of our educational institutions. This is the commentary, is we trade the truth that we know in here and out there, we trade it for a lie. And instead of worshiping the Creator, we begin to worship Mother Earth and study it and think that we control it and preserve it because we are the masters of our own universe. And we trade the truth that we know inherently for a lie. And Romans 1 says we actually suppress the truth. It's like the truth wants to bubble out and we push it down. And you can see it happen over and over again. To the point where God abandons them to do whatever they want to do. It's like God's not going to just suppress you. I mean, ultimately, he's given you the choice. Ultimately, he's given people the choice. And they've chosen to reject what inherently is true to them here inside and outside. And they begin, because they were built for worship, they can't get away from that. So rather than worshiping the God who created them, they worship what he created. And then they figure out different things about what he's like. And they trade the truth about God for a lie. So even though they knew God, no one who knows God anywhere in the world honors God. So even the person alone on an island, they do this. Even though they know God, they suppress it. And they don't give him thanks for the worship that he deserves. And what that leaves us with is what Romans 1 says, so they have no excuse for not knowing God. You know, we can look at that and we can read this, and if we're calloused Christians, we will say, good. Sooner or later, they're going to get what they deserve. Because I'll be honest, there's some nasty people in this world who spread death and destruction and deception. And in my callousness at times, I'm saying, I can't wait for them to get theirs. I mean, you know, in my mind, those people are, you know, like the person who just resigned from leading Planned Parenthood. That's the kind of person I'm like, man, I hope she gets hers. But this is why this message is so important. Okay? Because that's not a fire that God wants burning in our hearts. Because we look at this and we know the process, because you know the truth about Romans 1. And listen, you can reject that if you want to, but I'm just saying that's what the Bible says, okay? And this is all we teach, okay? And so, like, you can argue with it, or you can choose just to pick and choose parts. If you want to pick and choose parts, you're probably not going to be comfortable here. There's plenty of churches in Charlotte that just pick and choose parts, so go to one. But we're going to go after the uncomfortable places and the uncomfortable truths. And this is what the truth is, whether you accept it or whether your life reflects it. It's the one reason why we don't accept the truth. The number one reason is because it doesn't currently reflect our life. And it calls us to change. And if you're going to accept the truth, then you have to be troubled tomorrow when you head into work and you go to school and you're sitting around a group of people whose eternity is eternal suffering for their own sins. And God has planted you there to be this message. And you can't get past your own callousness and disgust with their sin and their thought patterns and the things that they trust in and the things that they believe in to actually love them into God's family. Or you're in a relationship with them and they like you, but they like you because you've never shared with them the truth that could change their entire lives. Because you can't get over your own hang-up with, well, I don't want to be seen as, that kind of Christian. I just want to be an accepted Christian in our community. And to do that, you kind of got to be quiet about Jesus. And you definitely have to be quiet about heaven and hell and the difference. And so this is why this message has to get out. All right. Later in Romans, this is how Paul continues, okay? Romans chapter 10, he says this, if we openly declare that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. This is what he defines. This is entrance into God's family. This right here is the difference between spending eternity in hell and eternity in God's family in heaven. This is it. It's declaring Jesus as Messiah, as the Lord, believing in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. I mean, it's so simple, but we want to make it so complex. It's so simple, but it's clouded up with all that goes along with Christianity. And we got to push that away, and we got to be able to challenge people and share with them this truth. That believing in the fact of Jesus' death and resurrection and putting your hope in that for salvation is all the difference. That's the good news. Because we don't have to work for it. We don't have to earn it. We can't deserve it. We don't have to scratch and claw for it. We don't have to wonder about it. We don't have to wonder if we're good enough because yesterday we did this, and maybe if we make up for it a couple of times, then we'll go, and maybe in the end it'll balance out, or we'll get one up and maybe make it in. We don't have to worry about any of that. We just have to worry about that Jesus, is he the Messiah? Is he who he said he was? Did he come to pay the price for my own sin and purchase me a place in God's family? And believe that God raised him from the defeated death and sin, and raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. Look how this goes. For it is by believing in your heart that what? That you are made right with God. Man, when you put it this way, let's quit talking about heaven and hell, okay? Because that's like abrasive. But guys, everybody that you lock eyes with deeply wants to be made right with God. Okay? I mean, that's why people get into these religions. That's why people do crazy things religion-wise. I mean, things I can't even, fathom when it comes to, because they have this deep desire to be made right with God. And religious leaders who are not Christian abuse that. They take that desire and use it to lord over people and control them and dominate them. And it's working. But it is by believing in your heart that you are made right with God. And it's by openly declaring your faith that you're saved. Like this is the truth. But then this is where it gets troubling. For everyone, listen, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. That's not troubling. That's very comforting. Because it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter your socio-economic class. It doesn't matter your education. It doesn't matter what language you speak or don't speak. It doesn't matter if you're literate or illiterate. It doesn't matter. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. That's it. But how can they call on him to save them unless they believe in him? And how can they believe in him if they've never heard about him? And how can they hear about him unless someone tells them? And how will anyone go and tell them without being sent? That's why the scriptures say how beautiful are the feet of the messengers who bring good news. This is why we go. It's why we have to go. So faith comes from hearing. That is, hearing the good news about Christ. See, here's the chain of logic, okay, in Paul's mind right here that we just went through. All right? First, the only way to be saved is to call on Christ's name. It's the only way. It's the difference. Inside the family, outside the family. It's calling on Christ's name. Second, the only way to call on Christ's name is to believe the gospel of who Jesus is. Third, the only way to believe the gospel is to actually hear the gospel. And the only way to hear the gospel is to actually be told the gospel. It's the logic. See why this message is so, there's something in us that if we are not burning in some way to speak the gospel to those who don't know, like we're playing church, we're playing religion then. We've gotten trapped by whatever has captured us. And we've lost focus. And I'm not willing to let us lose focus because it's too important. Everything hangs in the balance with some people about whether you choose to speak the gospel. Because if you don't speak, they can't hear. If they can't hear, they can't believe. And if they don't believe, they are apart. And they'll never be made right with God. I don't know how more urgent it gets than that. And just a couple more truths from Jesus' words. Because this adds weight to this whole thing. John 14:6, Jesus told him, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. Listen, like Jesus, his message is not a message that I am a way, a truth, a life. And I am a way to the Father among many. That is the lie that keeps people bound. Jesus is intensely exclusive. And I know it's so popular in today's world to claim Jesus as this humanitarian, to claim him as this wise teacher, to claim him as kind of this rebel that rises up. But they don't want to claim this because Jesus sets himself apart. You either worship him as Lord and you accept the totality of who he is, or you reject him as a liar or a lunatic. That's the only options. There's no good moral teacher that's good to be followed when it's comfortable, but once it rubs against the grain of our society or the grain of what we're being taught or the grain of what's accepted in the roles that we're in and the communities that we exist in, then all of a sudden it's okay and we just don't have to just talk about that part about Jesus. No, like you have to, like Jesus is the watershed moment right here. And it says you either fall on this side where Jesus is the only way to God. He's the only path to God. He's the only one that provides salvation and forgiveness and entrance into God's family. Or he's not. But he claims that he is. So he either is or he's a liar. And he's a lunatic. It's the only options. But our world wants to pull us into this nice, comfortable middle ground where we talk about Jesus and we sing about him. But we don't let who he is drive our behavior on this topic. Because we're afraid of persecution, we're being afraid of being made fun of, or we're afraid of being labeled in one of those categories. In Acts chapter 4, Paul says, there is salvation in no one else. God has given no other name under heaven by which we must be saved. That's it. So that's why I asked these guys to create this sign behind me. Because I'm going to promise you something for the rest of this year. The series that we're going to be in is Jesus. Okay? And that's all we're going to talk about for the rest of the year. Because there's no other name under heaven by which we can be saved. It's the name above every single name. It's the one word when you boil down, what are we about? What are we doing, church? It's this. It's Jesus. And that's it. And so we're going to be talking about different aspects of the life of Jesus. I need you to have the confidence when you're in different circles, talking this week, next week, whenever. And God's like, you should really invite them to come. I need you to have the confidence that when they come, we're going to be talking about Jesus. Okay? So that's where we're at. And I'm going to fill you with that confidence. I'm going to equip you with that information. And I'm going to make it as interesting as I possibly can make it. But it's going to be talking about who he is, what his message was, what difference he makes in all aspects of his life. Because we've got to recapture something that's been a little bit lost in the haze of pursuing good things, but not this thing. And it needs to drive you out. So, band, if you guys want to come out and get ready for this, because I want to close with this. But I watched a movie when you're on international flights. Like I try not to watch any movies heading up to those flights so that I can watch movies I hadn't seen and pass the time. And so this was about the last movie that I watched on our way back yesterday or the day before, whenever the time period is. And it's called Flatliners. And I'm going to ruin it for you right here, but you should still watch it. Number one, it's not a spectacular movie, okay? I mean, like, it's just not, okay? But it's a group of medical students who intentionally create near-death experiences so that they can kind of study the brain of what happens at death, which is a good topic. And as the movie progresses, the people who do this are haunted by their sin. They even speak it in the movie. They're haunted by death is having to face your sin. Death is ultimately having to come face to face with your failures in life and pay the price for them. It's why I believe this message today, because even Hollywood can't get away. They would love to bury the gospel, they just can't. Why? Because it's the only story. And it comes out in movie after movie after movie. Like, why would you create this reality? Why would you create this film where you're into near-death experiences and the reality of it is you got to come face to face with the sins of your life? And their interaction about this is just like a 2 or 3 minute clip where they are facing this reality. And the solution they come up with is to go and seek forgiveness from the people that they've sinned against. And if they don't, they die. Because they go crazy. Because their sins got them captured. But a couple of them are able to go back and seek forgiveness, restitution. Be forgiven. It's the most powerful words in the movie. This girl looks at this other girl, says, hey, I forgive you. I forgive you. Look, listen, everybody you meet eyes with, they are longing to hear a message from God that says, I forgive you. You can be made right. I forgive you. That's who Jesus is. That's what he came to do. He didn't come into this world to judge the world, but through him that the world might be saved. It's just a message, and you have it. God's called you to go. I don't care if it's around the world or around the corner. But you got to go. You got to speak truth. Because it's the most loving message you could ever speak to someone who's longing to be made right with God. And this loving God has provided salvation, has allowed him to speak. Jesus allows him to speak to anyone and everyone who would believe, hey, you are forgiven. You can be at peace because you're forgiven. Your sin doesn't have to wreck you because you're forgiven. Your sin doesn't have to depress you or lead you to dark, dark places. Your sin doesn't have to cause chaos in all of your relationships. You can be made right with God. You're forgiven because Jesus died for you. And it's that message that I hope today that God sets a fire in our hearts and our souls, that leads us places where we never thought we would go. Speak words we never thought we would speak. Because we're driven by love for the people around us. So will you stand right now? I just want to close with this song. And it's an invitation, like you're speaking, that you're singing this to God. God, set a fire in my soul that I can't contain, that I can't control. We want more of you, God. We want more of you.
Fire down in my soul that I can't contain, that I can't control. I want more of you, God. I want more of you, God. So set a fire down in my soul that I can't contain, that I can't control. I want more of you, God. I want more.
something for me. I want you to look at those lights. I want you to look at Jesus. And I want you to stare as much as you can right into those lights. And then in a second, I'm going to just keep staring because I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Because when you close your eyes, you can still see Jesus. So keep staring, okay? And I'm praying for you that from a fire in your soul that is Jesus, that He will lead us to places we never thought we would go, and He would let us speak words we never thought we would speak, and open doors of opportunity to speak Jesus. So as you're looking at Him, my challenge for you this week is to identify 3 people by name. 3 people that you know are not right with God. But they're your neighbor, they're your classmate, they're your coworker, they're your family member, they're your spouse. I don't know who it is. 3 people. And you would say, Jesus, I need you to set a fire in my soul for what's most important in those 3 people's lives. And I want you to use me for those 3 people to bring Jesus, to shine Jesus into their hearts, that they might come to enjoy being a part of God's family, being made right with God, having peace with God, and join us to worship Him. Okay? All right, you're looking straight at the light? All right, close your eyes. God, help us to see Jesus in every corner of this world, in every corner of our lives, in every place that we go, that we would bring the light of Jesus into these hearts, into these lives, into these souls that you have surrounded us with, and that it would burn so deep within us that we could do nothing else but declare your goodness, to declare your death and resurrection, that they might be forgiven. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.